So I invite everybody to mute yourselves. Don't make me do it. And let's settle in and get centered and prepare ourselves for a wonderful time together. So, Divine Presence, we welcome this opportunity to share and learn from each other and learn from the founding fathers and mothers of the Unity movement. We know that all is well in our universe. And we have a daily word today. I'm going to put it up and see if anybody would be willing to read that for us. See if the technology works. If anybody's willing to read the daily word for us, just unmute yourself and read.
I'd be glad to, but I can't seem to figure out how to mute or unmute.
All right. Well, I can mute you then, but I can hear you
Okay.
now, so you're good.
Okay. Look ahead. I look ahead with positive expectation. Sunday, February 2nd, 2025. So many things pull at my attention. The things I must attend to, meeting the needs of others, and even my own pursuits and passions require my time and attention. Setting and working towards goals may sound like a dull undertaking, but it's actually an empowered path to spiritual freedom. Working towards a goal helps me to focus and keep me motivated. I call upon and claim my spiritual gifts of imagination and order to set my goal and plan to achieve it. I use my gift of wisdom to discern the best path and my will to make the best choices. This is the way I use the power of God to give my life meaning and make my dreams come true. I look ahead, grateful for God's presence within me. Let your eyes look directly forward and let your gaze be straight before you. Keep straight the path of your feet, and all of your ways will be sure. Proverbs 4:25 through 26.
Thank you, Rhonda. Appreciate that.
You're welcome.
I look ahead with positive expectation. I look ahead with positive expectation. Let's affirm that together. Together, I look ahead with positive expectation. Seems to me this is a version of the best is yet to be. So welcome back, those of you who have been participating, and welcome to anybody who's here for the first time. As we've been saying, we're sharing the Unity Correspondence course that was created back 100 years ago, maybe more, sometime around the First World War, in by the Unity founders. There's 8 lessons in the first course, and there's 12 lessons in what was called the advanced course. These were mailed out to people who wanted to know more about Unity back in the day before the internet, and actually back in the day before the telephone. And U.S. mail was the internet in those days. And so people received these lessons one at a time, and there were questions that accompanied each lesson. And in order to get the next lesson, you had to answer a certain number of the questions correctly. You would send your answers back to the village. Or actually, again, I make that mistake. The village wasn't there yet. Send it back to Tracy Avenue, and the team there would grade them, and presumably everybody passed. I don't know. And then they would send you the next course and so forth. So it was a way for people who didn't live in a place where there was a Unity Center to learn about the principles and maybe even be inspired to start a center where they lived. So we're in the first lesson. The first lesson was written by Charles Fillmore himself. The subsequent lessons were written by other members of the Unity staff and approved by Charles. And this lesson's called The Silence, and we've been reading through it. Again, the format is the way Mark Hicks designed this for us. Well, let me get it up. Let me put it on the share drive here, and we'll take a look at that together. So the way that Mark set this up is the questions that are asked in each correspondence course are interspersed through the text, so that he put these questions in the sections where he thought the answers could be found. So it's a way of helping all of us cheat. So, for example, with number 18, which we read last week, it says, "Why is it necessary to pray believing that we have received?" And the text has that information in it. Or if it doesn't, we talk about that. I think we discussed the question last week as to whether this covered that question. And we were working at the end of last week's time together. Lillian read this for us in the conscious unity with God section. How do we come into conscious unity with God? And we said that last week um, we would we would start here. I mean, we ended here, and Lillian, you read this for us, but I think we're going to read it again. So, because there's a lot of important information and conversation to be had in these two, or this very long section, number 19. And before we start, I want to just remind us that the lessons are now posted to the Unity, Capital City Unity website. The first one is up. The second one we're not going to post because I forgot to record it until halfway through. And the third one will be posted this week. They'll be posted on Thursdays for those of you eager to remember what the heck we talked about. And of course, if you have friends or um, family members who are interested in this, you can direct them to the website and they can certainly watch or catch up to what we already worked on. So before we start this reading, is there any questions about that, the logistics of how we're running this thing, how we're communicating? Okay, questions are appropriate anytime during our time together. And again, if you're a newcomer, we just do this for an hour, and we wrap up with prayer at 9:30. So, um, who would like to? Who would be willing to read? It's a very long reading. It's 2 paragraphs, but it's a lot of stuff. But that's okay. Any volunteers to read for us?
I would.
Della, Gillerin. Thank you.
How do we come into conscious unity with God? This claiming of what is ours in truth we call affirmation. Jesus was bold and fearless in making the highest claims for himself. He affirmed, "I and the Father are one," and "all things whatsoever the Father hath are mine," and so raised himself above the prevailing thought of the world. In this way, he demonstrated his sonship. He is our example. He came to teach us how to attain the realization of our unity with God. We can attain this realization by following in his steps, by doing as he did. He said, "Judge not according to appearance, but judge righteous judgment." In the realm of the manifest world all about us, many things appear true that are not true in spirit, and we are freed from the habit of judging by appearances and established in the consciousness of the truth of our being by the prayer of faith made in understanding. One of the names of God is I am. I am is being. When we enter the silence and speak the name I am, it brings our being into conscious union with Him in whom we live and move and have our being. There is in reality but one being. Oneness means sameness. We are to become conscious that we are unified with God, are the same in nature as God. This consciousness comes from knowing that I am, knowing that I am, from thinking, feeling, and claiming that I am a spiritual being, a child of God. As in the stillness of the soul, we meditate on that which we know God is. We are to become conscious that I am that I am. God is love. In the silence, I am being that which God is, love. Therefore, I know I am love. So, with all the other qualities of God, with all the other qualities of God of which you may think, you are to be them through thinking and feeling these qualities or ideas within you, and then you are to make them manifest. The belief of separation of our being from God's being is only a part of the falsity that comes from judging by appearances. We overcome this by claiming, affirming, and praying in faith. I and the Father are one. The first step in entering the silence is to think of the presence of God. The second step is to feel oneness with God, the good. Upon these two fundamental steps, all true prayer rests, for thinking and feeling build consciousness. Shall I keep going?
Yeah, it's our habit to go over the
Yes.
notes as well.
Okay.
So if you would.
Yep. In reference to the phrase demonstrated his sonship, we reveal our sonship to ourselves and to others by claiming it, by declaring that we are not a child of mortality, but a child of God, that the Spirit of God dwells within us and shines through us, that this Spirit is Christ, Christ of God, child of God. In reference to the phrase, I am is being, if you would know the mystery of being, see yourself in being. Know yourself as an integral idea of divine mind, and all other ideas will recognize you as their fellow worker. Throw yourself out of the Holy Trinity, and you become an onlooker. Throw yourself into the Trinity, and you become its avenue of expression. In reference to the phrase, feeling these qualities or ideas within you, the I am, wisdom, puts feeling into what it thinks. And so Eve, feeling, becomes the mother of all living. Feeling is spirit, which quickens. Woman symbolizes the soul region of man and is the mother principle of God in expression.
Great. Thank you so much, Della. So there's a lot here under the heading of how do we come into conscious unity with God? Or maybe I should say that differently. How do we come into conscious unity with God? So, any thoughts or reactions?
Wow, I wish this would be started in Sunday school, this idea.
Maybe it is in Unity Sunday School.
Is it?
I would I didn't go through Unity Sunday School, so I can't say.
Right, yeah. Did anybody?
Well, nobody in our group.
Well, I had our kids in Unity Sunday
Okay.
School, and I can't say that it was as clear as this, although this is a lot for a little person to
Yeah.
take in. Um, but it's a hard concept, I think, for anyone, especially a little one, when the world is trying to tell you something different.
Right.
The value would be to start young. I think that's where you were going, Lillian.
Yeah.
Because you said I wish this were taught in Sunday school, and I grew up in a Catholic school, and we didn't get any of this.
Yeah, I was a Protestant Sunday school. We're born with sin and, Father's
Exactly.
looking down on us.
Right. So that it goes to what Claudia, you were just saying, is that those lessons are lessons in dualism, separation. So if God is up there looking down on us here, then we are separated. And that's what we internalize. And that's partly why I love the unity approach and these correspondence course lessons, because they're establishing a means by which we can shift our belief from the dualism to the unity. And of course, the heart of that is in this very section here. How do we come into conscious unity with God?
Well, I think we err all the time. Um, it's a real effort to remember to use the power of the words I am, and remember that you're claiming something when you, whatever comes after that. So, I am sick. I feel awful. I'm upset. I'm angry. So it's really an untraining, even for somebody who's been in the movement for quite a while, to remind oneself that I am is the alignment of your soul with the divine, and whatever follows that I am is something that you're claiming for yourself
Yeah,
from the universe.
and bringing into manifestation by that.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. Anybody else have a thought or comment, question about this section?
Yeah, I do. Okay.
Yeah, Diane.
Thank you. I find it very bold of Jesus to say, I and the Father are one, and all things whatsoever the Father hath are mine. That is damn bold. And I'm thinking to myself, that's so, they're saying that that's how he raised himself above the prevailing thought of the world. And I think to myself often, do I really believe that? So often I think in my head, I and the Father are one. Intellectually, I agree with that. I can honestly say I believe that. And that all things that the Father hath are mine. I'm a little more queasy about that one. But I just wonder how believing in the head and knowing in the heart the same thing is not the same thing. Am I making myself unclear?
I get what you're saying.
It's hard for me to put into practice what I intellectually believe and know to be true. I really believe it. But then I think in myself, do I really believe that? Can I manifest it? There is human mortal self-doubt, even rising above the mental belief. Anybody else experience that, or am I out in the wilderness? Thank you, Marty. Lily,
one of the problems that I continually have when I'm in church services and everything else, everything refers to God, and then when we stop and think about I am, I am God. One of I'm not saying it very well, but that because of our discussions and language that we use, there's continually the separation between the self and God as an individual separate from ourselves.
Yeah. Language is by its nature dualistic, because
Yes.
each word is designed to set itself off from all other concepts. And so language is a challenge to us here.
I kind of think about it as the ego and the soul on a continuum. And, when I'm acting out of that soul, which I also then think of that I'm encased in, the oneness. So the closer I am to acting out of the soul, I'm more aligned with Jesus's words, the Father and I are one. The more I'm on the continuum towards the ego, you really are seeing Claudia's personality show up and not that individualized expression of God. As Emily Cady said it, we're personality and individuality. Personality is, I kind of think of more closer to the ego, individuality as the divine spark within us. So, at any given moment in time, I get to choose, well, hopefully, but sometimes not always, it's just reactive, where to come from, the soul or the ego.
Yeah, for sure.
I think I end up being confused at different times. I had too many years of Methodist background, but I am thinking more about what you said, Marty, about dualism and how that separation was one of the biggest issues I had. And so my sister actually introduced me to Unity, and she's been with Unity for years now. But um, as I as I approached it, as I learned, I easily was able to rule out other spiritual feelings and beliefs. And so I kind of I think it is a matter of claiming it, even if it's there's some confusion about it, but it's a matter of, are you going to stick your toe in the water, or are you just going to jump in? um, and so the more I'm learning about myself and my own, somebody said, like, intellectual part of me says, okay, well, yeah, that is what I believe. And I'm doing this as an adult, and if it had been started sooner, that would have maybe been helpful. But I can compare it to how I was raised and what I don't believe in. And so as I try to say more I ams, sometimes I'm only like toe in the water. And it takes me, a little bit to adjust to it and really claim it. I think it's the claiming that is the uncertainty part.
Yeah, thank you. Let's look at this section here. You are to be them. These are the qualities of God through thinking and feeling these qualities within you. And I think that the challenge here is to unify, to marry, to merge thinking and feeling, which we dualistically consider two separate activities, internal activities, and begin to consider them perhaps more like two sides of a coin, or like the yin yang symbol. They belong together. And so, for example, just notice anything that you're feeling right now. And would you be willing to consider that feeling is part of the unity with God? That's God feeling, God creating, generating feeling through the medium of our bodies, just as thoughts are generated through the medium of our brains. But this body is unified. The brain, the nervous system, the muscles, the bones, they're all part of a single unity. And so that's why you see this exhortation to us to consider thinking and feeling together, as opposed to considering them separately. Now, we have to consider them separately. That's, again, that's the way we're designed, but we are capable of moving toward experiencing them and understanding them as a single activity. And I get this, I started to really understand this when I read Practical Metaphysics, Eric Butterworth, and he spends a lot of time going into this, the unity of thought and mind, or thought and feeling, which is the unity of body and mind as a concept, but as an expression or experience, we're always feeling something. Our bodies are, as I've said before, our bodies are emotional tuning forks, and we can't not feel, just as we can't not think. And so we can just allow, it's what I love about meditation. I can sit in silence, and we've talked about that in earlier parts of the lesson here. We talked about the secret place of the Most High. I can sit in the silence, I can watch my thoughts, I can feel my feelings, And I can just know that's God expressing through those thoughts and feelings in me. That's the way I approach it. Maybe others have other ways of doing it or thinking about it.
Are you, Marty, are you discerning between, or is there a difference in your mind between the positive feelings of or characteristics of God, or maybe the feelings that are like anger and frustration and annoyance? I mean, all of those feelings we feel. But I'm trying to like think, are those feelings from God too?
Well, if it isn't from God, that means there's dualism. That means there's something outside of God, and that's not where I come from on this.
What occurs to me is when any one of us expresses anger, we don't know about it because we're not there. But when they're in our presence, we know about it. But that gets back to if I I I think that all of mankind is connected by by spirit, by something else, and we all affect each other in the ways of our emotions and everything else, because it gets it's all part of the system, and we see it when we're an immediate part of it. But I think that affects all of us. There's a connection that way, and we feel that sometimes. The best way I can describe feeling with it, you meet a brand new person and you instantly have feelings or emotions where you read what they're all about, and so I don't know. I'm going to stop it with that.
Okay, great. Thank you.
When in the part that you highlighted, when it says feeling these qualities or ideas, which are these qualities or ideas? What do these qualities or ideas refer to?
Yeah, so we started up here just above it. God is love. I am that which God is love. Therefore, I know that I am love. And so with all the other qualities of God, of which you may think. This is before Charles developed the 12 powers. So consider that the 12 powers.
Okay.
Those are qualities of the divine that we participate in or share because we are also of the divine. That's the way I understand this. Maybe someone has another way of understanding it.
See, that makes sense to me. What I see is the potential danger of this train of thought is that anybody can say, I am God, and then start acting like that, no matter whether they are really tuned in to the love part or my understanding of the love part. But, does this, I know that this sets up a duality, but this can lead to false prophets.
And probably has.
So how do we know?
Great question. Anybody?
So we're admiring the question, huh?
Well, that's why we're here because we don't all necessarily know everything we'd like to know, and maybe others have some thoughts. So that's why we're sharing. So
I
it's a
think
great.
that's why he's put in. I think that's why he's put in the footnote for 3. That and you mentioned the 12 powers, the I am wisdom, the I've never seen the Eve feeling before, but it certainly brings up what that could be, which is nurturing, loving, mothering. I've never seen that statement, though. The Eve, what symbolizes woman symbolizes the soul region of man. but it does seem to be the talking about that which aligns itself with the universe, soul good.
And just to follow up on a technical note on a comment there for all of you, is that when you see this reference, that's MBD is Metaphysical Bible Dictionary. So if you go to the Metaphysical Bible Dictionary and look up Eve, this kind of information will be there. Or up here, you see RW. RW is a revealing word. All of these texts are on Truth Unity. So for those of you that want to dive ever deeper into this material, part of the value of these footnotes is they all have links. You can click on this link here or on the Eve one, and it will take you to the entry in the Metaphysical Bible Dictionary on Eve. So again, Mark has done a really great job for all of us here who want to continue to learn what the Fillmores, and particularly Charles, were up to in the development of unity thought.
Back to Martha's point, though, about, how do you know somebody can claim, but not be in alignment with it. And I don't know, what comes to mind is when you know, right? I mean, you certainly know who's in alignment with the good traits or God the good, and you get a pretty good sense of that, who are on the other side of the coin. Let me put it that way.
Thank you. Talking about common sense, Claudia. When we say wherever two or more are gathered there in my name, that to me demonstrates the connection that we have with each other, even though we don't talk to each other or anything else. And when we all get together for church services, there's a consciousness throughout the audience that's there that is connected with that.
I find it interesting in that third annotation where the comment feeling is spirit. Do you see that?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm thinking, isn't thinking spirit too? Is feeling only spirit of the spirit? Is our feeling nature the most important rather than our thinking or wisdom? Thinking of the 12 powers there. What do you think, Marty?
Well,
I consider that the implication here is Adam and Eve, and he's emphasizing Eve. This is Mark. So this is Mark making this footnote, by the way. All these footnotes were written by Mark and his team, not by Fillmore and the original group. Okay. And so Mark is basically reminding us, as we consider these things, that feeling and thinking are partnered as Adam and Eve were partnered.
Oh, okay.
That's the way I understand it.
That makes more sense.
Well, and Diane, when you said that, I felt that it's the feeling faculty that ignites the action. I can say I'm tall, I am, but if I don't feel it, if I can't feel it, then it's not sparked into being. It's the feeling that ignites the I am.
Okay.
Let me ask a question.
But what this says is
that
the I am puts feeling into what it thinks. So it's the opposite of what I think that you just said, Claudia. I mean, so basically, I think it's back to the duality. What comes first, the chicken or the egg? I think that basically, I think it's more like it's both together and they work together. It's not one that comes first and then the other. I don't know, although that's not what that says.
Well, in a non-dual approach to what you're saying there, Martha, the chicken and egg are one.
Mm-hmm. Feeling and wisdom are one.
Correct.
That's what.
Well, you have to think it to feel it, right? I mean,
Or you, or
So consider
well, sometimes you have to feel it to think it.
right. So would consider it's like a developmental hierarchy. When we're born, we're just feeling, we're feeling critters where our brains and our reasoning power haven't developed yet. Then at age 4, 5, 6, that we start thinking and the ability to reason kicks in and so forth. And when we move into the thinking mind, we start to downplay the feeling body, but they're all one thing. And so this work is, you might consider like the third level is to unify in consciousness, feeling and thinking. And that's a discipline. I've been working on this for some time now because
Yeah.
our minds are so trained to think and just and to think and to ignore or downplay or discount the feeling side of ourselves. And yet, as I said earlier, we're always feeling and we're always thinking, and they're actually the way I've experienced this now through this is spiritual practice, my friends, is thinking and feeling are a unified experience. And here's the irony is like we can't think our way to what I just said. Because then we've split off the feeling. So it's moving to it's moving to a higher level of experience or knowing, or maybe as Mark says in that third footnote, the I am, this is the level of wisdom.
or like you said, maybe it is the yin and the yang. I mean, there's no,
Yeah.
it's not dual, that's together.
And also it's an invitation to remember. Now, part of the way that we're doing this work is we're reading these things in chunks, and we don't necessarily, or I don't, I'll just own it. I don't necessarily think of this in continuity with what we read earlier, but remember what we read earlier about the secret place of the Most High. When we all go into that place, we can be beyond feeling and thinking. It's what mystics often call that process contemplation. When I'm in a contemplative inner chamber, secret place of the Most High experience, thinking and feeling are transcended into some kind of knowing, some kind of embrace where then I come out of that and then I think about it. My thinking mind analyzes what happens and comments on it. But the experience itself, in fact, what Charles says is that this all comes out of the silence. The silence is the primary place metaphysically that then can separate into thinking and feeling. Maybe that's a way to approach it.
Yeah, and one of the problems is that as soon as we start trying to talk about it, we're into the thinking part and not the feeling part.
Exactly.
And so words can approximate it, but not really capture it.
Exactly. That's why poetry is more powerful than prose, because poetry is the one way that human beings figured out how to use words to transcend words.
Mhm.
So oftentimes, particularly in poetic expressions, we're not only reading the words, but we're reading between the lines. That's where that notion of between the lines comes from. There's something else being communicated beyond the words, and because poetry can, really good poetry can awaken feeling just through the medium of words, which doesn't
It's a
happen as
terrific
easily with prose.
That's a really good observation, Marty. Thank you for that.
Yeah, that's good.
And you could even elevate that into music. So music can maybe even be the next level above poetry.
Or another, maybe not level, but another.
Okay, yeah.
Of course, I remember my student who said, but Mrs. Bunce, I looked between the lines and there's nothing there.
They didn't detect the silence. So
They didn't detect the silence, right?
But again, we have to be trained to this, don't we? I mean, I didn't learn about meditation in my Catholic upbringing at all. I mean, maybe somebody talked about it, but we weren't taught it. And I'm not saying it to knock it. I'm just saying that this tradition that the Unity New Thought folks came up with comes out of mystical Christianity, or as Mark calls it, metaphysical Christianity, not out of the traditional Word of God, Bible-based understanding, which,
The word, the
which
words.
yeah, which seeks to have an intellectual knowing, which, as Emily Cady says, I forget which chapter it is, maybe you remember, Claudia, but there's one of the chapters where Emily Cady says, trying to understand this through the intellectual mind is a waste of time. You can't do it.
But here we are trying.
Yeah.
I love that Phil commented in the fall that he spends 20 minutes twice a day in a silence. And I don't think every time you spend 20 minutes in silence, you get to the place we all are seeking. But you don't get there if you don't spend the time.
Yeah. And I heard someone once say, Della, that it takes 20 minutes to settle the mind down enough to feel that inner shift. And that's my experience, but it may be my experience because I believe it. So it's, believing is seeing. So I don't know. But 20 minutes is, I think, a minimum.
In studying transcendental meditation, the practice is 20 minutes twice a day.
Okay.
I mean, that's pretty standard in terms of the amount of time I think most people can be in a meditation and not fall out of it until you're very practiced at it. But that's a good rule of thumb.
Yeah.
Reading last night in Mark's book about godless metaphysics and Christian metaphysics and the difference between the two. And it seems like in all of our discussions this morning, we're going back and forth between that. And if any of you are interested, that's on page 56 of his book, The Credo of a Metaphysical Christian. So for what that's worth.
Yeah, thanks.
That's in Mark's book?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Anything else on this section, or can we move ahead? What I like about these lessons is we have this conversation, then the next section has some information about what we've been talking about. So the next section is conditions of true prayer. Anybody? And there's a lot of footnotes here, so but the footnotes are all kind of brief, so we can just read the footnotes ourselves. So anybody willing to read paragraph 21?
Marty, did you miss a paragraph?
I did. Thank you. Thanks, team. Holding a thought. What is meant by holding a thought is used in connection with prayer. Now here we are. Let's see if we got some insight about that thinking feeling dichotomy here. Anybody be willing to read number 20?
I'll read it.
Okay.
20. Students of practical Christianity sometimes speak of holding a thought. This means that they take some statement of truth into the silence, repeat it over and over, and meditate upon it until they realize its meaning, until it becomes alive in consciousness as spiritual understanding. This is the way to come into understanding. It is natural for the one who is yet in ignorance of the great all-knowing one within him to want to seek here and there of some man or some book for explanation of various texts of scripture. But the only way to come into the knowledge of truth is to seek the kingdom within. Teachers and books are helpful because they turn our attention within and help us to have faith in our indwelling Lord. The power to hold a thought is the power to concentrate upon an idea. There's a definition. Concentration, as used in its application to spiritual development, means the act of fixing the attention upon a central idea and drawing all the thoughts to that center. Our thoughts require discipline. Thinking to a purpose must take the place of thinking at random. The silence gives thought discipline. Power to direct and control thought comes not from the personal will, but by centering within in I am. Thus, poise and self control are attained in our thoughts and feelings in realization. And in the annotations, number one, the phrase repeated over and over. The saying over any, the saying over of any denial or affirmation is a necessary self-training of mind, which has lived so long in error and false beliefs that it needs this constant repetition of truth to unclothe it and clothe it anew. And this reminds me so much of Myrtle Fillmore when she would repeat for her healing, I am a child of God. I do not inherit sickness. And she would repeat that over and over and over until her body believed it in every cell. Anyway, going on to number two annotation, the power to concentrate upon an idea. The silence is not a negative or an inert state of the mind. Many persons, not realizing this, have allowed their minds to become inert. And through this false conception of the silence, they have lessened their executive ability to no small degree. These persons, when attempting to practice the silence, often fall asleep. Isn't that the truth? Has that happened to everybody?
Yes.
To me.
Thanks, Diane.
Okay.
So, any thoughts or reactions, reflections, disagreements?
You've all had a chance to respond, so now it's my turn. I was in a session with Reverend Stan Hampson and one other person in our community church in Palo Alto, and we were going through the book Think and Grow Rich.
Belden, can you move closer to your mic?
Yeah, we're losing it.
And start over.
The group, just two or three of us with Reverend Stan Hampson with our church in Palo Alto. And we were going through the book Think and Grow Rich. And as we got into it in chapter 5, somewhere in the discussions, I always wondered why we have to repeat things over and over, which they're talking about in this morning, holding a thought. And I found out in that one of the things that transpires in a human brain is that if we keep repeating the same thing over and over, pretty soon our brain comes to believe it. And once that belief is in there, then it becomes so strong as a prayer that we begin to have results of our prayer because of that thing, because we've gotten to so much that we completely believe what we're saying over and over again.
Great. Thanks, Veldon.
So along those lines, Veldon, I was listening to a podcast that I just came in to be, in kind of awareness of, and that's Mel Robbins. And on a YouTube clip, she had a neurologist, and the topic was manifestation without the woo-woo. So this was all about how the brain works, to your point, Veldon, about why you can manifest. And not once did they mention, the neurologist, mentioned God or universe or metaphysics. He just talked about the mechanics of manifesting. And the first one was writing it down. The second one was saying it aloud. The third one was saying it over and over again. The fourth one was putting it in a place where you would repeat it. It was everything that we've learned in our own, through the years. But it was fascinating to find out just the mechanics just works. That's how we're wired, I just thought he forgot to tell us who wired us. But anyway, it was very interesting.
Thanks, Claudia. Anybody else on this topic? What is meant by holding a thought as used in connection with prayer? I'd like just to comment on the power of focus here. I remember once I went to a retreat, maybe some of you did, that Gail Darren and Gail Vinson hosted back in the day at the in the Jim Lee years at Christ Unity, and they did an exercise with us where we were asked to get into a meditative state and write down every thought that popped into our minds. So we get into a meditative state for a minute, and then they'd say, "Okay, stop and write down what showed up." And we did it for 15 minutes. And I had this like yellow legal pad, and I'd written down these things. And when we were done, they basically said, "Okay, now take a look at what your mind produced." And I was shocked and nonplussed that the stuff that my mind produced was incredibly mundane, boring, commonplace, inconsequential. Things like that person's shoes are blue or stuff like that. And I had this insight, which is that the really powerful thoughts, the transformative thoughts, the useful thoughts when we focus on what it is we want to know. Otherwise, there's just random stuff going on in mentation, and it's got no particular focus. But and focus is an act of the will. What do I want to know? And it's like putting a magnet in a bunch of iron filings. It just suddenly comes together. And so for me, when you think about Emmett Fox's golden key, what does he say? He says, take your focus off the problem and put your focus on God. And there's just power and focus. And again, focus is an act of will. So the act of will is not a thought, nor is it a feeling. It's an intuitive energy. So just that's the way I like that. I like what he says about fixing the attention upon a central idea and drawing all the thoughts to that center.
So, Marty, are you able to keep up that practice of starting your meditation with a focus on a thought?
If that's what I want, yeah.
Uh-huh.
Or sometimes we just go into the silence and see what gets produced by giving it space. And then we can focus on that. But like right now, most of us here are focusing on this conversation. So when we do that, we're excluding all the other possible thoughts that are in our mental field. And if you stop focusing, that's like stuff will just start showing up because the mental field somehow is always generating mental activity.
Right.
I like the phrase, the silence gives thought discipline, which is not easy. And
Yeah.
it makes me think of transcendental meditation when you do the training and they give you your secret word, because at least you have that to concentrate on.
And is that a kissing cousin to a mantra?
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
is.
They're those are
Secret word is.
mechanisms of focus.
So, this passage speaks of Emily Katie's affirmations and denials, and we
Right.
talked about that last week. Is to clear air thought, use denials. To reframe your brain, that's how she says to use affirmations. Your brain, I don't know that that's the right thing. To reframe your mind, use affirmations.
Yeah, that's Mark has that quote down here. It needs this constant repetition of truth to unclothe, that is to unclothe the error thoughts and clothe it anew with the desired thoughts.
Yeah, that's what made me go to my book here.
Yeah, for sure. We have just a couple of minutes before we're going to wrap up. So, any last minute thoughts about this or anything that we've discussed today?
Would you like to hear the denials?
Go for it.
This is Emily Cady. There is no evil. There's one power in the universe, and that is God, the good. God, the good, is good and omnipresence. There is no evil. There is no absence of life, substance, or intelligence anywhere. Third one, pain, sickness, poverty, old age, and death cannot master me, for they are not real. Fourth one, there's nothing in all the universe for me to fear, for greater is God that is within me than that which is in the world. Repeat these 4 denials silently several times a day, not with a strained anxiety to get something out of them, but trying calmly to realize the meaning of the words spoken. And then she says it again, there is no evil, and then parens or devil. So, there's her denials.
Great. Thank you. All right, my friends. Well, we're going to wrap up now. Thank you for joining us today, and I just really appreciate everyone's thoughts and shares. And even if you have not verbally shared anything, you're sharing your spirit with us, and I'm glad that you're here. So, would anybody like to pray us out?
I will.
Okay, thank you.
I'd like to take the power of prayer, the one we always say, and give you my version of it.
Please.
The light of God surrounds and enlightens us. The love of God enfolds and flows from us. The power of God protects and heals us. The presence of God watches over and guides us. Wherever we are, God is, and all is well. Amen.
Amen. Move over, James Dillett Freeman.
Nicely done.
Thanks, Lillian. Thanks, everybody. Have a powerful week, and we'll see you next week.
Marty,
Yeah,
Marty,
Martha.
do you have my email address that you can send the link to me every week?
I have an email address for you. I saw it when I sent the link out yesterday. You didn't get it?
I might not have had a chance to look at it yesterday.
Okay.
But Claudia keeps me up.
Okay. I send out the reminder every Saturday.
Okay.
And it's the same. It's the same
Yeah.
reminder every time. So if you keep one, you have it forever.
And if you put it in your calendar, you'll have it from your calendar.
Exactly.
I did send it to him, though, for you, Martha.
Thanks, Claudia. Because I knew I had it.
Yeah. And we already had that. So just so you know, we already had that on our master list, your email address. So
Woo, 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 woo.
I know it's very exciting, isn't it?
Nice seeing everybody. Have a great Sunday.
Good
Take care. Love
Thank you,
ya.
Marty.
Bye-bye.
Bye.